Welcome to Talent Titans, the podcast where we bring you entrepreneurs and leaders from the global staffing industry. I'm your host, Suki Sodi. Now let's jump right on in and welcome today's Titan. Hi, welcome back to another episode of Talent Titans. I have a guest today who also is, I call a very close friend, Tracy Rocca. Tracy, welcome.
Thanks for having me today. I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you for choosing to share with us. Now, those people that don't know you, who is Tracy?
Oh, loaded question. So Tracy has been in this business for over 30 years now. I started accidentally, as many people do in the staffing industry. And I worked as a receptionist at a very large global agency at their headquarters. And I think since that, over 30 years ago, I've done pretty much every job there is to do in staffing. Wow. And currently I'm the national vice president at a nationwide organization in the industry.
Amazing. I don't think any of us actually sit there saying, I want to go into staffing, right?
Yeah. And, you know, we were talking about this last week at some meetings we had internally. And how do we change that story? Like, how do we get to kids that are just coming out of university and say, hey, this is a fantastic career for you to embark on? And so, you know, we've talked a little bit about how we change that and we start to create our own talent.
Yeah. It's weird because I very much was so scared, and I'm showing my age here, of ending up, no disrespect, secretary, that traditional route, right? And when I did go into a staffing agency, they were like, well, what kind of work do you want to do? I was like, I have no idea, but I can tell you what I don't want to do. Right. Yes. And one of the big things is that I didn't want that repetitive. I wanted excitement. I wanted no 2 days to be the same. And let's be honest, that's what staffing is, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And you know what? Segues us nicely into today's conversation because leadership. Yeah. If we're going to bring more people into the industry, we're going to retain the people we've got. A leader makes or breaks the business. Poor leadership versus good leadership. You know, and I think you see all these different styles of leadership. Okay. But the truth of the matter is we're in the people business and leadership is about the people, not your spreadsheets and things like that. So I want to talk about leading with empathy. Now, that means different things to different people, but I think fundamentally it is the same. So I'm going to dive straight in. How do you bring empathy into your approach to hiring and team building, ensuring that each candidate or employee has a meaningful experience whilst either going through the process or working with you?
I think, you know, when I think about empathetic leadership, you're right. It means so many different things to so many people. You'll hear me a lot today probably talk about being your true authentic self. And that's really, for me, where my empathy comes from, because I think, you know, in my personal life, I'm a fairly empathetic person. And I always say now I'm too old to change who I am. So this is just it. You get me like this at home, you get me like this at work. But I think when you're doing that hiring, the more authentic that you can be with somebody and that open conversation, it creates that right space right from the get-go. There's no hidden agenda. There's no something that will be a surprise in a little while. Right from the interview, it's a conversation more than listen, anybody that you interview can tell you anything that you want to hear. Yep. And that's just, you know, you said it perfectly before, dealing with people. But I think it's so important that, you know, we have that conversation just as two people talking about themselves a little bit. It sets that tone right from the very, very get-go. When we're doing interviewing, when we're talking about team building, I think this is a big part for me, is that everybody brings this different perspective to the organization. And that's what makes us special, is that, you know, we haven't all come from the same background. We haven't all come from the same organization in the past. And making sure that we're really listening to people, listening to their ideas, listening to what their challenges are, how they solution. Not everybody learns the same way or solutions the same way. So just giving people that space to be also their authentic selves really builds the team camaraderie. I mean, it has to be that safe space where people can feel good about voicing their opinion. And even if nobody agrees with them, it's still a safe place to voice that opinion. So those are the big things in our organization that help to build our team in every single meeting.
There's a couple of things I want to just unpack a little bit further there. You talked about the safe space, right? When, certainly in my opinion, everybody that has an opinion is not expecting their opinion to be heard and implemented. What they want to know is they've been heard.
Yes.
Right? There's a difference there because people are frightened of asking opinions because, oh my God, I've got so many opinions and I'm going to upset somebody. A lot of people, certainly in my experience, they just want to know they were heard and they contributed, right?
Yes. Oh, I was just going to say, like, one of the first things that I say to people when I interview them, and it holds true for the whole time that we work together, is that we have to hit the budget. That's why we all have jobs. We have to hit our budget, but we have to do it with respectfulness and kindness. And those are non-negotiables in our organization. And I just think that when you have that line of respect, people are feeling safe to be heard because there's a line of respect, there's a line of kindness, and we can disagree, but we have to do it respectfully. So it just sets the tone.
So 2 points I want to come to. Back up a little when you said about the open, let's get to know each other from the very first communication, first meeting, whether it's face-to-face, telco, whatever it is. As you were saying that, a thought that was going through my head was many leaders are scared to ask somebody in that, get to know the person in that meeting, just because there's so much legislation. You're allowed to ask this, you're not allowed to ask that. So how do you, I'm very much like you, I want to know who's the person, right? And I'll share who I am. I have no issues with that because it's two-way traffic. But I wonder how many leaders don't do that because they're like, I want to do that, but I don't want to, HR told me I can't do that. Legal told me I can't do that. So I guess what I'm saying is, how do you as a leader create that environment in that first interview and stay, for lack of a better word, compliant?
Right. It's a good question. And I think that for me, right at the very beginning is that I set the stage to say, this isn't going to be probably a traditional interview where we talk about every single job detail that you've done in the past. I just really want to get to know you because it's important that you fit us and that we fit you. So in order for us to figure that out about each other, we need to have this open conversation. If there's anything that I ask you that you don't want to answer, that's completely fine. But I just want to have a chat about who you are, what you want. If you could write your next job description, what would it say? Because it tells you a lot about that person. And maybe you find out through that conversation that the role that you're interviewing for is maybe not a fit in that moment, but you've gotten to know this person and the person is a fit for your organization. You start to create a different space for them maybe. So that's what's so valuable about having that open chat, is that you have them not just telling you why they fit that specific role. You're getting to know them as a person to make sure their culture fits into your own, because that's the most important thing. We spend more time with the people we work with in a lot of cases and the people that we choose to love and choose to spend time with outside of work. So, we have to make sure that we have this great place to work. It's important.
Yeah. And I think as you were saying that, thought going through my mind is to candidates that are listening to this, regardless of what level you're at, they need to come into this with an open mind and mindset and take off the blinkers, right? Because they'll soon be able to tell whether someone's talking to them to discount them or genuinely get to know them. I think
absolutely
that I think you can tell. Most people can tell, right? So there's that part to it. So that's one reason I think some leaders don't do it the way you are, right? And create that environment. What about those leaders that are leading with more of a antiquated dictatorial type of leadership, right? Because you've got these big organizations, right? Your global organizations, and they have their blinkers on. They only want to see this much, right? So
Right.
how does your style compare to somebody like that? Because how do you run an organization and take the blinkers off? Because they're going to say, no, we are a X gazillion billion dollar company. We can't, too busy, only have
Mm-hmm.
15 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour if you're lucky with this candidate. And we just got to make sure that they can do the job. What do you say to people with that type of mindset?
Well, I just think that if you take your blinkers off and you get to know people in a different way, they can become so much more productive when you know what makes them
Yeah.
tick. And you can't really understand what makes them tick until you really have that open, honest, authentic conversation with them. So for me, not everybody needs to be led the same way. Not everybody wants to be managed or held accountable in the same way. And if you are having that open conversation with somebody, you can really get to know what drives them. And everybody's driven by different
Yeah.
things. Some people are driven by money. Some are driven by having I always say the atta girl, atta boy, like good job. Everybody needs something different. And unless you have that conversation, you don't know. And it can make your business so much more successful when you really truly understand how your team wants to be pushed and how do they want to be motivated.
It's weird because as you were talking, and I totally agree with you because everybody has different motivators, but in our industry, we're salespeople, and what I find people, they're looking for someone to say money. What motivates me?
Yes.
Money. Don't get me wrong.
Yes.
Even with me, I run my own business. Number two is money, right? For most people, it's in the
Yes.
top three. But money alone doesn't motivate. I don't know what the stats are, but I'm going to go out there on a limb and say most salespeople are not solely motivated by money.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
Humans, we want to be liked. We want respect.
Mm.
We want to feel appreciated. So I find it really interesting and strange that a lot of sales leaders are looking for the candidates to say, I want to work for your company. I want to make all this money, right?
Mm.
And those that do end up hiring those people are usually a nightmare to manage as well because, right? Think about it.
Yes. And what's really interesting is that, there's always two answers that I want from a salesperson. And that's, I want to win.
Yep.
Sure. Like they need to want to win. And I think that is the same answer as money, to be honest with you, because when they win, they get paid. Let's face it. So I think it's really important that they want to win and they have that drive to be the best, but also and I'm generalizing, but most great salespeople, especially in our business, they want to be told they're doing a great job. They want to be respected. They want to be liked. And that's because when all those things happen, they win.
Yep.
So it's all those things. And again, if you're just asking that question of what motivates you and you want the answer money, is that really true? Because a lot of salespeople know that that's the answer you want to hear too. So when you really dive in and you dig a little deeper to say, okay, money's great. And I'm super happy that that's what motivates you because that's a win for us. But what else is it that you need in your day? So just the money, or do you need the accolades? What else is it that really drives that winning day for you?
Yeah, because that win in our business, especially if you're on a split desk, right? Doesn't matter what size of accounts you're dealing with, national accounts, doesn't matter, sector doesn't matter. You can't really win unless you understand people, how to get people to work with you, which is the delivery side, right? And when you're solely money focused, and I'll stick to our industry, right? All that creates for a business is this turmoil, toxic environment, because you've bought this person that's going to win at all costs and they tread over their counterparts on the delivery side.
Right. It's so important that salesperson, again, this is what I talk about, getting to know people and building your team. I don't want a team that is all the same.
Yep.
Because also that creates, you talked about, if every single person wants to win, what a chaotic and probably toxic environment that's going to be. But when you have these people that are all motivated by different things and they all add different value in the organization, they start to get to know each other. And if you've just interviewed and said technical skills are checked and you don't know how they're all going to interact with each other, you're not going to have a successful organization because nobody's going to be able to talk to each other. Or really, I mean, you talk about our industry, this is teamwork.
Yeah.
You can't be, unless you're, if you're running a small business and you are your sole proprietor and you're doing all the work, that's great. But if you're going to be in a bigger organization, you need to be a team player and you need other people in the organization to support you, to respect you, and to work with you. So,
but it's also external as well, because if you've got an aggressive, I'm right, I'm closing this deal, almost Wolf of Wall Street type of person, right?
Yes.
What about the client side? That if they're doing it internally, they're doing it to their clients.
Absolutely.
Right? So how many clients are they losing because of that attitude?
It's scary to think, and this is the thing, is that you and I were talking, earlier about, that control. Yep. So, having that control, you have to be able to trust your team to go out and do what's right for the business and for themselves and, right by the organization. And so again, if you're not doing that full interviewing and getting to know people at their very core, it's hard to build that trust. And so you have to know that person. Sure, we can't control. I always say, the day that we can control whether an associate goes to work will be a, hallelujah day. But in the meantime, we can't control people. So we have to do everything we can to really start to understand who somebody is, what motivates them, what drives them. And then you have that trust that they're going to go and they're going to look after your customer. They're going to look after your candidates. They're going to do those things,
Okay. So now we've hired individuals. We know who they are. We've got to know the person behind the name, behind the recruiter, BD manager, VP, whatever that might be. So now as a leader, how do you balance that empathy with the need for high performance, especially when you're scaling teams or it's a startup? Because a lot of people, because I've been doing a lot of interviews on this particular topic, a lot of people really struggle because they're empathetic and that's who they are, right? They're caring for their people. And then the business demands, especially in the year we've had. How do you balance the two?
Well, I think that, again, it's that open, honest line of communication. And it doesn't have to be a difficult conversation, but we're all adults. So I can have a very respectful conversation with somebody to say, you're not delivering. And these are the expectations. We're very clear. I want to back up just a minute because we have KPIs that are set. And I always say, people have this negative connotation around KPIs. And for me, KPIs are put in place so you can manage yourself.
Yep.
Not so that I can micromanage. Oh my gosh, you were supposed to make, 30 calls and you made 29. That's not what it's about. It's about the end of the week. You can look at your desk and say, I didn't deliver what I was supposed to do, but did I do what I was supposed to do? Did I do all the activity that I had to do to be successful? And 95% of the time, you haven't. Because that's what KPIs are built on, is that if you do these things, the end result is going to be there. And so I feel that, you can have empathy and I can understand everybody has stuff going on in their lives. Also, as you mentioned, it's been a tough year in our industry. Yep. It's been a very tough year, but it doesn't mean that we don't do what we're supposed to do every day. And I think that, just having that open conversation with somebody that's not had a successful month or not had a successful quarter, to say, review and go back and say, but what did you do? You own this. I don't own this. This is kind of on you. And I think when you always have that at the forefront, you're able to have that open conversation. So nobody's ever blindsided about where they stand and what their path is.
I think there's also the whole KPI thing, micromanagement. I don't want KPIs. The truth of the matter is, every single person who is employed, actually even business owner, I have KPIs and it's my business. Okay, my KPIs look different from Chris's, look different from Q's. An accountant, somebody who's running an accounting team, they have KPIs. That money has to, the invoice has got to go out correctly this time. Cash has got to get collected by XYZ.
Right.
Everybody has KPIs. We just happen to call them KPIs, right?
Right.
So there's not a single, your doctor, right?
Yes.
They have KPIs. They
Yes.
have metrics that they have to hit. So I think there's this misconception that, oh my God, KPIs is just in sales, in the staffing industry, just the recruiters and the frontline people get KPIs. No, your accounts
Mhm.
team has it. Your legal team has it. They have to get you the contract red lines back by X time frame,
Right.
right? So I think
Right.
we look at KPIs as a negative. We look at it as a way of, oh, our boss is trying to control us. You nailed it.
Right.
We're not trying to control you. We're trying to say to you,
Nope.
look, averages, right? Because you
Mhm.
have your weeks like this, right? Good day, bad day. We deal with people, right? You could have 10 meetings booked
Yes.
today. Oh, you're very good if you have 10 meetings booked today. You could have 10 meetings booked this week, right? 4 of them could be a no-show through things way out of your control.
I think when you change your mindset and you say, the thing that we talk about all the time is that, we have to hit budget. Again, I talked about it earlier. That's what our job is. That's what we're paid to do. This is the money. We owe a check to the organization at the end of the day for this much money. And, everybody has to do their part in order for us to get there. And you have to take responsibility for yourself and for your own actions. And if you can't take that responsibility, then maybe this isn't the place for you. That's okay. We can go still have a coffee together if you'd like, but maybe this isn't the place for you.
But it's having the
to continue your
confidence to
journey.
say that and own that.
To me, it's the most empathetic way you can have that conversation. The kindest way that you can have that conversation is to just be open about it. There's no point in berating and yelling and screaming. Like, for me, it doesn't work. For me, it's just not how I lead. But not only that, but when you're open and honest at every single turn of the conversation, there's nowhere for somebody to go. They either have done their job or they haven't. And so it shouldn't be a surprise to them if you have to have a difficult conversation, unfortunately.
Well, there's a lot to be said, about this poor leadership, right? And poor is relative to different people. I get that. But our
Yes.
industry, we tend to have this, and one of my clients sums it up really well, armchair generals. Okay. They're
Yeah.
sitting in their 30,000-foot view, right? They've got their office and they talk to the team beneath them, their VPs, but they have no idea who this person over here is. Now, I get it. When you're running an international business, you've got 1,000 people working.
Yes.
I get that. But surely you should know at least who's a couple of tiers down, because,
Right.
but they don't. They don't see that as part of their job, right? So they're like, no, I'm telling you to do this, you execute on this, and they go to their people, and it's almost very siloed, that leadership style. I just don't see that working in the long run in our industry, especially with the way everything's changing now.
No, I agree. And I think, there's a couple of things. First of all, one of the things that I implemented a number of years ago, and it was, one of my leaders that I had in the past did it. That's where I learned it from. It wasn't my idea, but having coffee chats. So scheduling a 15-minute coffee chat with other people in the organization that don't report to me, may report in, one level below, like you're saying, or wherever they are in the organization, but making sure that you have that 15-minute coffee chat with every person, if possible. I mean, I'm not running 1,000 people organization, but as many people in the organization as possible. It's 15 minutes, but not only that, it humanizes you to that person. So when you're asking them to do something that's difficult, they're saying, oh, well, she took the time or he took the time to have a conversation with me. And I feel really driven and obligated to really give them the support that they need on this particular file or on this particular project. So a couple of ways that you can kind of just bridge the gap.
I do like that. I've heard of a couple of people that do that, but you're right, because there's only so many hours in a day, and we all expect leaders to work the hours it takes to do the job. Then we go and say work-life balance, right? So it's crazy. Actually, you know what? I'm going to throw in a question there. What does work-life balance to you look like?
Oh, that's such a
I
loaded
know.
question,
I
especially
know.
in today's world. And I hate to say this, but it's different for all
I
the
agree.
generations. And yeah, I think that for myself, I'm at the top end of the Gen X. So I feel like, I'm not at that boomer stage, but I hear what they say
Yep.
and I understand what they say. And I think we definitely have done a better job in work-life balance as we've come through the
Yep.
generations, I feel like. And, it's interesting because I say that, as frustrated sometimes as we as an older generation are with how predominantly Gen Zs feel about work-life balance, we've done that. We're the ones
Yeah.
that raised them. So, from a parent perspective, kudos. We did a great job at teaching our kids that, they have to have balance in
Yep.
their life and this is healthy for you and all of these things. But we don't take that ourselves. And I think that making sure that you've given everything, I would say if you can look yourself in the mirror at the end of the week and say, I did everything that I could do to make my organization successful and to make myself successful at the end of the day, I've had a good week. I did a really good job this week. And so sometimes that means that you've worked a little overtime, a little bit extra, but just making sure that you have time for your family, making sure you make time for yourself. All these things are so important because when you don't have that peace in your personal life or that peace for yourself, you're no good to anybody at work. So making sure that you can talk about that. It may not be somebody at work, but most organizations have a great EAP program. They can get some help if they need to, but just making sure that you really understand what that balance is for yourself. My balance is probably significantly different than somebody else's balance, maybe because of my role, maybe because of my generation, but I like to take time for myself. I like going to the gym. Those are important things for me. But if that means I have to work at night, I'm totally fine with that. It comes with a role.
Yep.
But somebody else may not have that same
I think
understanding.
in our industry, I'm going to go out on a limb and say this. You can't do if you want 9 to 5, this is the wrong industry for you.
Mm-mm,
Frontline,
mm-mm.
because your candidates want to talk after work. I'm not saying every single
Yes.
day, right? You can manage it. Dave in my team used to allocate 2 evenings, right? So in
Yes.
his day, in his week, beg your pardon, he had 2 evenings where he would go home, then take a call at 7:30, whatever the case might be. But he'd actually
Yeah.
planned it in because candidates, especially when you're dealing with different time zones as well.
Yes. I think it's so important. You're right. This is not a nine to
No.
five job. So I say that all the time. But you are responsible for creating your own
Yep.
balance. So, Dave, your example with Dave is, he called me many times after
Yeah.
hours. So it's very true. But I think, making sure that he created that
For
balance for
him.
himself. So maybe he came in a little bit later that day, or maybe he took a little longer lunch and did something for himself at lunchtime, or like you have to be able to be flexible and to kind of roll with it a little bit instead of saying, well, I stayed till 5:05 today, so I'm going to come in at 9:05
Yeah.
tomorrow. It's just not realistic in our business. We have to be able to be a little bit more fluid with our
Yeah. I
time.
mean, you would never get Dave on a Thursday because he was playing hockey or football, right?
Yeah.
So don't try and get a call with him after hours on a Thursday because it just wasn't going
Perfect.
to happen. Because to your point, he'd integrated the two, right? The
Right.
work and the personal. And other people have different.
Right.
I know some amazing mums in this industry, right? They
Yes.
stop at 3:30, go and grab the kids from school, do whatever it is that they got to do,
Mhm.
right? And some dads for that matter.
Yep.
And then they'll be like, you know what? 8 o'clock, they'll go and do some sauce or whatever it might be, right? But they've
Yes. Yes.
made the two work together really well. So
Right.
I want to come back to the empathy and leading with empathy. Can you share an example? Because I want to give people some real practical stuff where
Mm,
you've had a challenging situation. You don't have to give us
mm.
the juicy details unless you want to. A challenging situation where you've stayed authentic to your empathetic leadership style,
Mm.
but how you've managed to navigate the situation or a difficult decision.
Yeah. There's so many situations that come to mind when we talk about this. I think I'm going to stay pretty generic and talk about layoffs
Yeah.
and changing somebody's career, because I
Well,
think
there's a
that
lot of that happening
the
at the
biggest
moment.
exactly. And I think, being in both temp staffing and perm staffing for as many years as I have, the amount of conversations that I've had to have around this, either internal employees, or with our associates, is way too many to count. And I can't go down that path, because you can never lose sight that you're changing somebody's world and really putting yourself in their shoes. This should never be a conversation that feels good, ever, no matter what that person has done, no matter how difficult they've been. And let's face it, we deal with people. So some of these situations are not great, but it should just never feel good. And so if you lose that, you somehow have to figure out how to get it back, because you're changing their world. You're changing whether they can pay their rent or pay their mortgage or put food on their table. And you just can't lose sight of it. You have to put yourself like, how would I feel? How would I want somebody to deliver that message to me? It's so important that you can get there. And if you can't get there, this might not be the right industry for you, because you have to make sure that that person feels okay when they leave their conversation. They're not going to feel great. Nobody's going to feel great when they leave the conversation, but you can't lose sight of making sure that person is okay when they walk away from the conversation with you, that they're safe, that they have resources that they can go and fall back on. Like, many companies offer career transition services to their employees, making sure that even if you don't offer that, what other resources can you give them? It takes 15 minutes to go and print a list of resources for somebody. And just knowing that you've made that day slightly, not quite as horrible as it was if you just ended their job and walked away. So that's the one I wanted to pick up on, because it's the one that we all deal with a lot. But just making sure, and I would say as a leader, not talking about a very specific situation, but as a leader, it is my responsibility to care for my team. It's the responsibility that I have taken on as a leader. And so if they're going through something challenging, they're going through something difficult, it's my job to stand behind them and make sure they get through it. Maybe we won't be together at the end of the situation. That's okay. But it's still my responsibility to make sure they're all right, to make sure they feel heard, to make sure they get through the situation. And then we have to deal with the solution at the end of it.
Going back to your layoffs, a lady messaged me end of last week to say they've laid her off a week before Christmas, right? 9 days. We got 5 working. This is the last full working week, actually, isn't it? As we're recording this, they lay her off.
Yes.
And I just, and we were talking, and she said her husband said something really interesting that stuck with me, and you've just reminded me, and I'm paraphrasing here, because I was like, wow, that close to Christmas. She said her husband has a theory. If they had not done it now, her particular boss would have had this hanging over her or him all over Christmas. Back in the mind, oh God, I got to go back. I got to do this. I got to do this. I got to do this. So it would have disrupted their Christmas, right? Their Christmas flow. So what they done was they ripped the Band-Aid off before. So now she's had a disrupted Christmas, but they are going through Christmas knowing they've made that decision. And when I read that, I read it a couple of times because we were talking over text. I was like, yeah, there's never a right time, but laying people off just before Christmas, to me, that sucks. You know those layoffs are coming. Why did you not do it the way I look at it, before people spent all their money on Christmas gifts and things like that?
Yeah. I think, though, that...
because that's not an empathetic leader.
Layoffs, and layoffs should never be a surprise. I think that, yes, you're right. If you know they're coming, to get them in as close to the end of November as possible is really where it should happen. But I also then believe that, you're right. There is no good time, because then January rolls around. But I also feel that, you talked about work-life balance. Part of our balance comes from spending time with our loved ones around holidays. And whether you celebrate Christmas or whether you don't, you just get to enjoy some family time with a few days off. It really is that time to connect with those that we love And so for me, I would rather make that decision in January so people on the team can enjoy that time with their family, with their loved ones. And then we have to make that difficult decision. Again, as the leader, it's my responsibility to bear that burden through Christmas, not
No,
theirs.
I agree. But also,
Wherever possible, wherever
yeah, but
possible.
also, what message have you just sent your whole team or company for that matter?
Right.
Right. So others are thinking, oh my God, layoffs, layoffs, layoffs. Am I next? Am I? So you just created this anxiety that need not
Right.
be there. Yet I know this particular boss, she tells everybody she's such an empathetic leader. She tells
Mm.
everybody she's an empathetic leader. But I
Mm.
watch the actions and I'm like,
Mm.
that's not an empathetic leader. That was not,
Actions speak
yeah.
louder than words.
And I think a
Always.
lot of leaders
Always.
forget that because they read these Bibles, right? Leadership Bibles. And they're, it's like, yeah, this is what I'm, this, it's almost like they've got it imprinted in their mind. When this happens, you say this because it makes you sound this, right?
Right.
But you're right, is don't tell me how great you are, show me how great you are. Because
Yes.
you know
Yes.
what? I cannot think of many reasons why you would lay people off this close to the New Year, Christmas. Again, regardless of whether you celebrate it or not.
Right.
That's the true sign because they're seeing them as a cost. Want a cost cut here? Okay, we can do this here. It's easier for us because now they're going to leave over Christmas, so they're not in the office. We don't have to deal with this. And in the new year, they come back and it's all forgotten. It really is sad that there's a lot of leaders that hide behind that, right? But they're only looking at people as a number on a spreadsheet.
Well, and again, you have to balance it. You asked the question earlier, a high performing team. I mean, people have to show up and they have to do their job, what they're paid to do. And so for me, very seldom, sometimes when an organization has had a tough year, yes, we have to lay off people that we don't want to lay off. And that happens. But most of the time, let's go 75% of the time, you shouldn't be surprised by that conversation. Again, you talk about KPIs, deliverables, booked dollars, however, whatever you want to say around it, you know whether you've delivered. In your heart, if you really, really ask yourself honestly, did I deliver? You shouldn't be surprised by the answer most of the time. And so, yes, there are times that it happens outside of that, but for the most part, it shouldn't be a shock.
Yeah, and I think as a leader, it comes back to, in this particular case, they had been told how amazing they are, how much more investment they're getting, right? So that was in this case. But I wonder how many leaders listening to this just don't know how to handle that type of situation, right? So somebody else says, okay, here you go, boom. They just go almost, for lack of a better word, robotic.
Right. But it comes back to that honest, open communication we talked about in the very, very beginning of the call today, is that if you know that that's the path you're going to go down, why is it a blind side? We have these open conversations across all of our lines of business here, and nobody should be surprised at the end of the day, because I've had open, honest dialogue with everybody on their performance, on what my expectations are, whether they've delivered. Those are always the things. And so I say, like, the blind sides happen when corporate says, hey, you have to cut X amount of dollars and you have to make some tough decisions. Those happen. Absolutely, those happen. But at the end of the day, if you're delivering, most of the time, they're going to find something for you.
Yeah.
Right?
What I'd like to think.
A sideways roll.
Yeah.
Right.
So I know we're coming up time, but I've got one more question for you. So sales or staffing, right? It's so fast paced, right? And especially with technology, it's like what you thought you knew yesterday has changed today, right? So how do you make sure that empathy remains a core value in your leadership and in your team's interaction? So, everything's happening so fast. Crap happens, right? It does. Client suddenly says, hey, we no longer want this, and you got to redeploy and stuff like that. And it's frustrating. Client defaults on. I was talking to a lady this morning, 2 months into a project, the company stopped paying her bills. So this stuff happens despite all the best intentions. So how do you,
Right.
even in those really high pressure, stressful moments, ensure that your core values of empathy, whether it's your leadership, peer to peer, remain, for lack of a better word, intact?
Right. It's that whole thought of having respectfulness and kindness in every day. And so stuff happens. I'm also human. So am I perfect every day? Far, far from it. And if I said that, there are days that are tougher than others, like that's just our business. And, you summed it up perfectly, is that, we can't control people, and our commodity is
People, yeah.
people. And so there are days that are tougher than others. And so at the end of the day is that if you have that day where you reflect back as a leader and you say, oh, I really wasn't my best self today, and I really could have done better, the best thing that you can do for your team and for yourself is to go and apologize for your behavior. And so I think, I would be lying if I sat here and said, I always am respectful, I'm always kind. I think that most of the time, yes, I am. But in tough situations, sometimes I'm not my best self. It's my responsibility to go and take accountability for whatever happened in the day. And if an apology needs to happen, I need to make the apology. And not because I have to, because I want to, and because it's the right thing.
There's a big difference there, right? Mm-hmm. I go and apologize because I have to versus want to, because then when you have to, it's really insincere. And the other person knows it.
Well, and you might as well not make.
I think you've done more harm than
done more damage.
I think you've done more harm, because now you've kind of like just opened the wound again in many ways, right? Or you've kind of like just rubbed salt in, or you've poked it. But again, somebody read a textbook or a Bible or was speaking to their buddy and they said, oh, well, if you go and apologize, it amends everything. And they're like,
yes.
Why do I? No, because a lot of just apologizing, and we will wrap up in a second, but just apologizing, how many leaders see that as a sign of weakness?
Oh, gosh, it never should be a sign of weakness. It should be, I said at the very beginning, you have to be your authentic self. And so maybe some of these leaders are not authentically kind, or don't authentically have empathy. And so they have to find their own path, and that's fine for them. But for me, I just find that this is the reason that we've been able to build such a great culture. This is the reason that we've been able to build such a great team, is that we do have empathy on our team. We do have respectfulness. We do have kindness, and we are authentic. So like I said, I can't stress enough how important it is to take those through every day.
No, I hear you. And just on your point about if empathy doesn't come natural and find your path, honestly, in my mind, you shouldn't be in our industry, because our business is people. Our business is people.
I agree.
Right?
I agree.
Everything we do is around people. Yes, we all have a bad day. That's not what I mean, right? But if you really don't have a level of empathy,
right,
I question whether this is the industry you should be in.
Yeah. I think, Suki, too, some people think they are empathetic.
Yeah, good point.
And maybe aren't. Maybe they genuinely do feel like they are for whatever reason. But when you explore it outside, it doesn't come off, or it doesn't show that they're empathetic. And so whether maybe they aren't and they believe they are, or maybe they're not great at it. They have those feelings of empathy, but they're not great at vocalizing them or showing them. Like you said, having that, it's a sign of weakness. No, it's a sign that you're a human being, that you care, and that you're going to make things right.
I love that. I think that's a brilliant note to end on, because here's the thing. Listen to this podcast, listen to some of the other empathy leadership podcasts that we've done. And you know what? You can lie to me, but you can't lie to yourself, because you're going to hear something's going to resonate, or it's going to make you really, really uncomfortable, right?
Right.
Explore it.
Mm-hmm.
Explore it, right? And then you want even more feedback, look at what your team say about you, not to your face, but behind your back.
Exactly.
Right? They'll tell you.
And those are the questions, right?
They'll tell you. if you just listen, they're telling you, they may
Yes.
not be telling you the way we're talking, but they are telling you that message is there. Tracy, thank you ever so much for this. I really, really
Oh,
appreciate it. Anyone that wants to reach out to you, what's the best way to get hold of you?
you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, Tracy Rocca. And that's probably the best way to get a hold of me. And I'd love to chat. I can chat about leadership and empathy all day long. So,
Well, you're going to be speaking at the
thanks so much
summit
for having me.
in April.
I am speaking
Yeah,
at the summit. So they can come up to me and have a coffee with me at the summit as well.
perfect. Or a glass of wine or two.
Well, probably
Yeah,
more likely.
okay.
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you ever so much for your time. I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. You take care.
Thanks so
See ya.
much. Have a
Bye.
great day.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Talent Titans, brought to you by Recruitment Professional Forum, where they're building a grassroots community for professionals and leaders in the recruitment industry to collaborate, advocate, and advance the profession. If you liked or were inspired by what you heard, make sure to follow, subscribe, and even leave a review. It lets more talented recruiters like you find the show. Until next time, keep on being a talent titan.